let's switch to the second part. Here I'm going to explain and show you some tricks about workload performance optimization for deep learning training that are really relevant for AC922 servers. I will first show you some why is it important and what is the typical approach, and then what are the typical things that we are doing here in Montpellier to improve the performances, so in terms of throughput, the performances of your training. So there is lots of things that here that you can apply to x86 server as well, but it even makes more sense on the AC922 architecture. I will show you right after that. So you know that usually we see more and more I/O pipeline complex, that are becoming more and more complex, even these days with more complex frameworks and models. So here you can see for the first AlexNet version, we just have a crop and mirror data preparation before the actual training, while later on ResNet 50, for example, you have lots of other data preparation like random sizing, color augment, and so on. And so we'll show you another example with a pipeline we've worked on very recently with Maxime, which is a typical complex pipeline. So you know that the CPU could become a bottleneck because all this data preparation is usually done with inside the CPU and not the GPU. So for example, if you are doing a training with 2 GPUs and you measure a typical, I don't know, 7,000 images per second that are processed during the training. So you can expect to double this throughput with a number of GPUs, but usually it's not the case when you're actually just do the measure. So when you look at a typical workload anatomy, so you know that there is a really important part at the beginning, which is the management of the data, where you have to actually store the data, clean them, annotate, do the annotation and the labeling if it's a training. So and then you have actually to develop the model training pipeline by itself, where you need to choose a model, you need to do the data preparation, to develop the data preparation. So there is some example of operation that you can do there. Uniformization, resampling, augmentation, patch, tiling, and so on. And after that, you have to actually develop the model training script by itself. And there is lots of things to consider, like the model types. So there is lots of parameters and options that you can exploit there. And after that, you have the post-processing. Usually, if your initial images have been patched in several sub pieces, you have to reconstruct the results, the output, and do eventually some output processing, maybe cascade the output to another model or another logic elsewhere. And once the model is trained, you have to consider to deploy this model in an application, usually, where if it could make sense to optimize the model for a specific targeted hardware. So it could be embedded devices and or smaller GPUs than the one you've trained your model on. You have also to consider the life scoring and the maintenance of your model. Think about feedback loop. to monitor the performance of your model and eventually gather other data to retrain it again, and so on. The models are becoming more and more complex again, with multiple input and output. So you have some example there. And in practical, for an automotive autonomous driving case, you have here two models that actually process the same input and merge and fuse the output in the same coherent result, which is an object detection and a segmentation for the road. So here is the example we've worked on with the Maxim. Again, it's a complex pipeline for image medical image processing, where it's for lung cancer detection, where we have to detect malignant nodules in the lungs from 3D scans. And we received thousands of 3D scans from patients that has been annotated by radiologists. So they paint like 3D shapes inside the lungs. And these labels are really useful for the training of, essential for the training. And then we had to do a lot of data preparation steps before actually train a model, a unit, in this case, a 3D unit. So we've done a lot of things that, resampling. We have to manage that the density of the voxels, so the 3D pixels are the same. We have the same spacing for all the scans, and so a lot of normalization. And also we decided to create a mask to actually extract everything but the lungs from the image in order to focus just on the nodules inside the lungs for the modules. And at the end, we wanted to also have we have also branched the output of the unit output to an SVM, so a classical machine learning SVM model to diagnose the patient itself from the diagnostic of the nodules that has been detected by the unit model. So quite complex pipeline that you can't actually run in a single notebook for sure. So it's a whole application. And that's typically the kind of AI projects that you can work on. So in this example, so we've developed the world chain, so which was functionally okay, but we had a surprise. So it's not really a surprise, but the performances were terrible in terms of response time, if you want, because of the data preparation take a while, like 3 minutes just to process one image. So it's actually 3 minutes, and while the inference of the model itself was pretty fast, like 1 minute, okay, for the forward. So it looks like when we look at the actual resources usage, like CPU and GPUs, GPUs were not used that much, and the CPU were also poorly utilized because the whole workload was dominated by a few single threads activities. Right. So we have a problem because our nice AC922 machine based on Power 9 and V100 is actually running as good as a traditional laptop based on x86 processors. So here we can go back to the actual architecture of the Power 9 AC922 compared to x86. So in this case, it's a GTX machine from NVIDIA. So you know that you have all these different the differences in terms of CPU to GPU interconnect in the Power 9, and also the system memory, so the bandwidth from the memory to the GPU to the CPU is also higher. So if you can compare that with road speed limitation, you can see that you can imagine that the memory is a warehouse, and you have actually to process items from a warehouse to two factories, which are GPU. And if you compare the speed limit from x86 to Power 9, you can see that from the warehouse to the factory, you actually have to go from a road which is limited to 77 miles per hour to a kind of city street where it's limited to 16 miles per hour. On the Power 9 machine, it's more like a highway to a freeway comparison. So in terms of speed limit, so it's a good. I like this picture because it's very attractive. So back here. So what we have to do here with the Power 9 is definitely to feed the GPU a lot more. As we have this NVLink bus interconnecting the CPU and GPU, which is very, very fast. We have also the fast interconnection between memory and CPU. We can feed the GPU a lot more. So all the challenge will be from a workload that has been developed on x86 to actually increase usually the data pipeline to feed our GPU as much as we can, a lot more than we can on a GPU machine, on the x86 machine. So when you have such problems, so we take usually a classical approach, which is you have a new workload, a new performance issue unknown. So you have to monitor and profile the workload itself, so do some few changes, so usually one at a time, and then assess the results to make sure that to measure actually what is the impact of the changes on the workload and loop again until the performance are okay, meaning that usually the GPU are well utilized. So we have first to monitor the resources of our system. So here nothing new. You can use a HTOP to just monitor the CPU usage as well as the memory. The memory you have so HTOP is very nice tool. You can filter the processes, sort by any characteristics from any processes in your system, like CPU usage, memory usage. You can eventually have a tree output from the processes inheritance. We also use, so again, nothing new, NVIDIA SMI, which show you what are the what is the CPU, the GPU usage, memory, as well as the CUDA core and the whole, the compute resources inside the GPU itself. I've put it there, so you have two lines that are shown here. I've put a typical command that you can run based on NVIDIA SMI to just have a very lean output and a very responsive and frequently refreshed output with the watch command. You can also use the NMON monitoring tool, a bit like HTOP, but it includes other important systems functions from the Linux kernel, like the disks, the network, as well as the GPU. So in one single pane, you can have in one single string, you have several panes that are monitoring the different devices and characteristics of your Linux environment. So it's also quite useful, and it also can collect data in background, so and create post-mortem graphs that you can display in Grafana or in your web browser. So once you have your you know what is the utilization of your resources, so you can just check that, for example, the GPU is not used that much. You then have to identify what are the hotspots in your Python scripts or projects. So you can usually use a cProfile option from so it's a default in Python. So it's everything is available, of course, in the OpenC environment, and you can very rapidly check for the functions in your code that consume the most of the CPUs and also time. So if you are using TensorFlow, there is a specific TensorFlow timelining option where you can show additional information about GPU and CPU usage and execution of your kernel. And what's nice is that it can produce a Chrome trace file that you can display in the Chrome browser, and you can navigate through the different devices that actually run and do the computation of your code, like GPUs and also the CPUs. PyTorch also provides its own profiling options, where you can actually see what other consumption, of the different Python CUDA kernel inside the GPU. And it's pretty nice when you want to actually profile the activity of the GPU with PyTorch. There is also another great tool provided by NVIDIA, like NVInsight, which can be also utilized, and it's interesting when you really want to drill down into the Tensor Core and CUDA Core internals and check if you are using the right, for example, the right mixed precision variable types and so on. So this is a typical example of an NVIDIA proof. So it's another NVIDIA profiling tool to show you what are the typical functions inside your GPU that are activated. And it also provides a nice GUI that you can where you can see visually where you are spending time, is it in the compute side or the data transfer side, and so on. Once you have done the profiling, you can also look if you, for example, if you see that you are spending a lot of time in components, so libraries inside Linux, or even it could be kernel time. You can use the Linux tool, the preferred tool for profiling your activity on the Linux box, which is Perf. Perf is interesting as well as it can also display hardware counters that shows what are the performance, what are the typical instructions and that are used inside your CPU. This is an example of a command where you can see what are the context switches rate, the CPU migrations, the number of so the cycles, so the frequency of your CPU, and as well as a number of instructions completed, the number of branches executed, missed branches, and so on and so on. So everything related to the CPU utilization. Usually we use perf only for very degraded cases where we see that we are spending a lot of time inside the CPU and we can't really figure out in which component and libraries this time is spent. Right. So perf also is supporting an offline usage mode where you actually record your workload, and later on you can actually create a report that you can sort according different columns values if you want. There is also a tool that could display graphically the output inside the boiler, which could be quite useful as well. And based on perf, you can also create flame graph, which are very useful because it can show the usage, the CPU consumption across not only functions but also the calling stack, the call stack of the function. So it's quite interesting if your functions inside your code are used in different through different paths and different call stacks. So you can really check out what are the call stacks that are most consuming the most CPU cycle. Well, once you have done all this, you have gathered all this data. So you have to identify the workload profile. So I like the code section inside your Python code, where you actually spend CPU, GPU. Eventually, you are. So that's what we are doing here. We change. We compare profile data with different workloads with different parameters values. For example, the number of concurrent workers, the batch size, and so on. So we can actually better understand where you are spending time, and you can compare the time you spend into your profiling code. I mean, the code that you have profiled with the GPU resources consumption. So after that, you can eventually categorize your workload like is it resource bound, so IO bound, or CPU or GPU bound, and so on. Is it dominated by a sequential or single thread, one single thread, I would say? Is there resource locking? So it could be the case for specific components. Actually, we mentioned HDF5, but HDF5 is known to have some to be designed across several locks that prevents, I mean, several workers to actually scale well when there is the same HDF5 file. And then you can also look at, I mean, if the workload is GPU bound, so you can imagine what you have to know what are the potential cause of slowdown. So here are examples of possible bottlenecks. So the code flow could not be optimal. There is too many try catch error handling. The array traversal is poorly done, or the workload too complex, and so on and so on. So you have to make sure, when you have to want to switch to the change part, you have to consider the biggest or the worst bottleneck first, for sure. And so there is several things you can imagine: update versions or change components, increase the system resources usage by increasing the parallelism, the batch size, use a large model support. We'll see in a few minutes. use more servers thanks to Reward, and or use mixed precision, and so on. You can also think to reduce the transfer by using asynchronous techniques to actually make sure, for example, that you are while you are running the kernel inside the GPU, you can transfer data into the GPU graphic cache that you, for the next time, the kernel won't have to wait for the transfer. So it could be useful if you have a free memory into your GPU cache. You have to consider also to simplify potentially the workflow by itself, and also apply best practices. So we mentioned as well PyTorch Lightning, which is a great example for PyTorch. So the data preprocessing, usually what we, this is our experience here. The usual suspect is the data preprocessing for sure. So it depends, depending on the framework you are using. You can consider several changes. For example, if it's Keras, we know that it's not it's a very simple framework, and the data pipeline could be improved, but not that much. So there is several options available in the feed generator function, so methods for your model, where you can actually increase the queue size and the number of concurrent workers. It's usually recommended for Keras to use the Keras embedded into a TF Keras, TensorFlow. TensorFlow also has pretty well now preprocessing components, but it could be also, again, it's not perfect. So and PyTorch, this is usually what we are working the most on here, is doing a pretty good job. And so you know, there is several options with PyTorch where you can increase. So there is this data loader component where you can actually set a number of concurrent workers to prepare the next items in typical training loop. So for that, it happens that from time to time, it could be very beneficial to actually code your own prefetching mode. So there is an example there from actually Apex. So check if it's here. Voilà. Okay. So in this example, so it's from the Apex. So Apex is part of NVIDIA project to improve PyTorch, the PyTorch framework a lot. So in this example, they used they have implemented a specific data prefetcher class that actually is going to preload the data into the into the HBM2 graphical memory of the GPU asynchronously, and they use a QDAS stream in a non-blocking way to actually feed the data, and then when you do the next, you just switch the current input to the prefetched one, and it's going to speed up the next kernel execution for sure. And in the training loop here, you can see that usually you have a for loop, and they change that for a while loop, and everything looks the same actually. And finally, as this preprocessing performance issue are becoming more and more prevalent in the industry, NVIDIA has developed a specific preprocessing library, which is actually very performant, named DALI. DALI, I don't know. And this is the one I'm going to focus on now. So DALI is an open source library provided in the GitHub. It's available in OpenCE. And it's going to offer you a lot of different APIs to speed up a lot of preprocessing phase. So it's going to use GPU as well as CPU for the preprocessing and the data loading. The performances are very, very good compared to usually the Python data loader or TensorFlow data loader techniques, and you can gain, I mean, few percent of a speed up in terms of throughput in your training. So you have the choice for your data preparation. You can do several operations using a CPU or a mix of CPU or GPU or full GPU. Like the augmentation can be totally done in GPU. So if you have enough idle cycle in your GPU, or if you consider that your data preparation pipeline is really too slow and you have definitely to speed up the things a lot. The way to use it is quite straightforward. There is you have to instantiate operators first and define a graph, an execution graph in an operative way, and then actually build it, and you can run it in your pipeline. So if you compare, if you look at the changes you have to make from your TensorFlow traditional pipeline compared to DALI, there is several. I mean, there is lots of example provided by NVIDIA. So this is typically how it looks like. And if I'm focusing on PyTorch, you can, it's a comparison with this data prefetcher class I've just shown. You can see that there is not that much changes, and I mean the logic is very similar. DALI is also providing other features and that could be useful, like the management of bounding boxes, also video helpers to actually manipulate the video files and create nice pipeline for that, as well as optical flow. So here are the links. All right, so another, so once you have improved a lot your data pipeline and the GPU is getting a lot more utilized, like it's reaching, it's now near the 90% average utilization, you can eventually think to eventually speed up the performances a bit more using mixed precision. And so it's, you know, that in V100, in the latest architecture from NVIDIA, they have implemented this nice tensor cores that are a lot faster than the traditional CUDA cores for reduced precision operations, mathematical operations. So it's optimized for mixed precision matrix multiply and accumulate operations like a G equal A multiplied by B plus C. And so there is a limit some constraints related to the format of the variables. So if FP16 for A, B, A and B, and C could be 16 or 32, and the results D could be FP16 or FP32. So the goal is to store the value in FP16, so the weight and the activations, so the tensors, along with their gradients, and to actually use tensor cores to accelerate math and maintain as well the accuracy. So inside a complex model architecture, not all the layers are, complying with mixed precision. So usually, even if you theoretically you can imagine to have the maximum speed up the tensor core can provide you compared to CUDA core, practically it's not the case, because you have to mitigate with the precision and make sure that you are not that your conventions will be okay, because sometimes if you have your variable based on FP16, you will lose a lot of precision even for very small numbers, and the convergence will be broken. So what's nice with mixed precision is that it's also going to reduce the memory traffic, because the variables, so the parameters of your and the tensors of your models are based on FP16. So most of them will be based on the FP16. It's actually it takes less space. So you reduce the memory storage as well as the memory traffic. So then you can imagine to, I don't know, to increase the batch size, or to eventually increase your model and so on. So here are some benchmark results provided by NVIDIA, where you actually see pretty impressive numbers compared to P100. So in terms of performance guideline, we usually consider that you have to bear in mind that the CUDA cores have some limitations related to the architecture. So you have to make sure that the dimension of your tensors and your layers should be multiplies of 8. And they have to be quite large. Okay. Same for the convolutions layers. So the number of channels for input and output should be a multiplier of 8. And if you want to set the mixed precision for specific model layers, you have to choose the layers weight and batch size of channels that also are multiplier of 8 in order to efficiently use against the tensor cores. And if you are not sure that you are using the tensor cores because the performance looks the same, you have to check for these and Volta FP16 S884 gem kernel name using the NV profiling output, and then you are sure that you are using mixed precision. So in a real world, there is a 3 way to switch to mixed precision training. So you can do it by yourself in your code. It's not recommended. You can also use libraries that enables by themselves mixed precision. Or you can also use fully automated tool that are provided, for example, in Apex for PyTorch that actually do the transformation in a quite smart way under the hood. So for the recommendation is to get familiar with mixed precision training and use use the fully automated tool, and then use libraries that enable safe update for more control. And if you are a very smart guy, you can use the first option. All right. So there is good results for sure. So there are some examples of benchmarks. So usually the speed up we measure here in Montpellier is about 2x. Because I mean, it's not 8x, but it's 2x, which is really good. And again, it will put more pressure on the data pipeline as well, because if your GPU is 2 times faster, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the data preparation pipeline. One thing that is really important in this chart that I've missed is what is the loss in terms of precision. So there have been a lot of different exercise and provided by NVIDIA that shows that typical loss in terms of accuracy is pretty low. Again, depending on the architecture. So we have several examples here. And we've done that for UNet, for example, here. And we've lost a few percentage. Right. For PyTorch, this is a change you should consider if you want to use this automatic mixed precision tool provided. It's now fully integrated inside the PyTorch, the traditional PyTorch distribution. And you have to actually instantiate a scaler, what they call a scaler, and you can see the different changes here. So it looks pretty much the same. All right. So once you have applied all these changes to our the pipeline I've described about the lung cancer, so we've been able to improve a lot the pipeline for sure, and the GPU are now utilized at around 90%. So was utilized at around 90%, and we were able to divide by 3 the number of the response time, so the latency of one single image call through the forward, so which is good. So here are the takeaway. So we will share the slides, so you will have all this for you. All right, and the links, different links for DALI documentation, the IMP, and some GitHubs.